For 3 weeks I lived in silence, thinking my daughter cared for me. But the first words I heard when my hearing returned weren't love. They were poison. She called me a burden, laughed about selling my house, and even plotted with a doctor to declare me incompetent. She thought I was deaf and helpless. She didn't know I was listening to every word, waiting for the perfect moment to answer. The first sound I remember was the steady beep of the heart monitor. To most people it was nothing but a machine, but to me it felt like music, a soft rhythm that reminded me I was alive. After 3 weeks of silence, even the scratch of the doctor's pen on a clipboard sounded like a gift. I blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room, almost afraid to breathe, almost afraid that if I moved too quickly the miracle would vanish. "Mr. Hale, can you hear me?" "Doctor?" Chen's voice came through clear and strong. I nodded, but tears had already begun rolling down my cheeks. I whispered yes, and then louder, "I can hear." The sound of my own voice startled me. It had weight and warmth again. I pressed my hand to my chest and felt my heartbeat keep time with the beeping monitor. 3 weeks earlier, the world had closed in on me at a construction site when a compressor blew too close to my head. The ringing had been sharp at first. Then everything went dark and silent. Doctors said it could be temporary, but they also said it might be permanent. I had spent each day sitting alone in a shell of quiet, watching people's lips move, guessing at meaning, pretending to understand. Every night I prayed to Nora, my late wife, and asked her to give me strength. And now, against the odds, the sound of shoes squeaking on the hospital floor was like hearing a choir. "Doctor?" Chen smiled at me with real kindness. "Your hearing has returned to normal levels. The inflammation is gone." Her words wrapped around me like a warm blanket. The nurse handed me forms to sign, and even the scratching of the pen across the paper made me laugh softly. I must have looked like a fool, grinning at every little thing, but I didn't care. I had been given back a piece of my life. As they walked me through my discharge, my mind was already racing ahead. I thought about the drive home, the sound of the engine starting, the tires rolling on asphalt. I thought about the creak of the steps leading up to my front porch. And above all, I thought about Lily, my daughter. She had been so patient these last weeks, staying in the house to help, writing me notes, cooking meals. She would be thrilled. I could see her eyes light up when I spoke her name without needing to write it down. The nurse warned me to take it slow, to let my brain adjust to sound again. But I hardly heard her. My head was filled with plans. I wanted to surprise Lily, to walk into my own kitchen and say, "Good morning, sweetheart," and watch her jaw drop. I imagined calling Daniel, my son in Cincinnati, and hearing his steady voice say, "Dad, that's incredible." The elevator dinged, and I swear it was the sweetest chime I'd ever heard. When the doors slid open, the hallway was alive with voices. Laughter, phones ringing, machines humming. Every sound pulled me further from fear and back into life. I walked to the parking garage, and when my old Honda roared to life, I laughed out loud like a boy. The radio came on by itself, playing an old Springsteen song Nora used to sing in the kitchen. I whispered her name, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like she might be near. The drive home was only 15 minutes, but I stretched it out, rolling down the window just to hear the world. Cars passed, horns honked. A dog barked on the sidewalk. A child's voice rang out, "Daddy, watch me," and it nearly broke me. I had forgotten how full the world was when you could hear it. Turning into my neighborhood in Westerville, the familiar houses looked the same, but the sounds made them new again. A rake scraped on a driveway. Wind rushed through bare branches. Somewhere, a basketball thumped against a driveway. When I pulled into my own driveway, I sat there for a moment, gripping the wheel, staring at the brick house Nora and I had bought 30 years ago. The porch light, the maple trees, the worn welcome mat, all of it whispered home. Lily's car was in the driveway. She must be inside, maybe cooking dinner, maybe watching one of her afternoon shows. My chest swelled with anticipation. This was the moment I had waited for through weeks of silence. I was about to step through that front door, speak my daughter's name, and remind both of us that life still held miracles. But my hand hesitated on the door handle. Something told me to pause just for a breath, as if the house itself was holding back a secret. I shook it off and smiled, eager to surprise her. I had no idea that the first words I would hear in my own home would pierce deeper than the silence ever had. I stepped out of the car slowly, letting the chill of the late winter air sting my face. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet you only noticed when you had once lived in complete silence. My shoes crunched on the driveway gravel, and the sound made me smile like a fool. I reached out to touch the brick of the house as I passed, feeling the cold, rough surface under my palm. This house had been my dream with Nora. We poured our savings into it 30 years ago, brick by brick, mortgage by mortgage, raising Lily and Daniel under its roof. Every window held a memory. Every step carried the sound of laughter or tears from another time. I climbed the front porch steps, and each creak felt like an old friend. The welcome mat was worn from decades of use, but it was ours. For a long moment, I stood there with the key in my hand, fighting back the emotion that rose in my chest. I wanted to swing the door open, call out to Lily, and watch her face break into joy when she heard my voice. Instead, I lingered, listening. From inside came the faint clatter of dishes and the murmur of voices. At first it warmed me. I pictured Lily in the kitchen, humming the way her mother used to, Trevor sitting at the table, family. For 3 weeks they had been my lifeline, or so I thought. I pressed my ear closer to the door, the sounds growing sharper now that my hearing was alive again. The tone of Lily's voice caught me off guard. It wasn't warm or gentle. It was sharp, edged with irritation. "God, that old burden is back home again," she said. The words slammed into me harder than any piece of falling equipment ever had. I froze with my hand still on the doorknob. My breath caught in my throat as Trevor's voice followed, steady and casual. At least the insurance money helped with his hospital bills. Could have been worse. I felt my knees weaken, and I leaned against the brick wall to steady myself. Surely I had misheard. My hearing was new again. Maybe it was playing tricks on me. But then Lily's voice cut through, leaving no room for doubt. "I just want this whole thing over with. 3 weeks of pretending to care about his every need. I'm exhausted." The house I loved so deeply suddenly felt like a stranger. My chest tightened as if the walls themselves were closing in. These were not strangers speaking. These were the voices of my daughter and her husband. The same daughter I had sacrificed for. The same man I had welcomed into our family. I thought of the nights I had lain in silence, comforted by Lily's soft pats on my arm, the notes she left on the counter, the way she guided me with patience. None of it had been real. It had been performance, a mask for something darker. I stood there in the entryway, caught between two worlds. One was the memory of the girl who clutched my arm at her high school graduation and whispered that she would make me proud. The other was the woman whose voice now dripped with contempt for the man who had raised her. I eased the door open an inch, careful not to make a sound. The hallway stretched ahead, familiar and yet different. The scent of garlic and lemon cleaner drifted from the kitchen. The light above the stairs flickered slightly, just as it always had. But now it all felt strange, hostile even. I could hear them clearer now. Trevor was talking about renovations. "Once he's out of here, we can finally start fixing this place up. Knock down that wall between the dining room and kitchen. Realtor says it'll add 50 grand easy." Lily laughed lightly, the kind of laugh I used to love hearing when she was a girl. Now it turned my stomach. "And the master bath, too. We'll get even more for it." My knuckles pressed against the wall until they turned white. They were already planning. My house, my life, my future, spoken of like it was theirs to take. I wanted to storm into the kitchen, slam my hands down, and demand to know how they could betray me like this. But something inside me told me to wait, to listen. I had lived in silence long enough to know the value of patience. So I stood in the shadows of the hallway, my ears tuned to every word, my heart breaking with every sentence. The house I built with love had become the stage for a cruel play, and I was cast as the burden they wanted gone. I clutched the doorknob until it hurt, fighting to stay still. My daughter had no idea I could hear her, and in that moment I realized that what I had gained back wasn't just my hearing, it was the truth. I knew I couldn't walk into that kitchen yet, not with the storm of anger and pain boiling inside me. I needed to hear more. I needed to understand just how deep this betrayal went before I decided what to do. So I took a slow breath and leaned closer, the hallway carrying their voices to me with perfect clarity. And what I heard next twisted the knife even deeper. I pressed myself against the hallway wall, every muscle tense, my ears straining for every sound. Lily's words rang inside me like a bell I could not silence. That old burden. I repeated it to myself as if saying it again would make it less cruel, but it only cut deeper. She was my daughter, my flesh and blood. I had carried her in my arms when she was too tired to walk. I had stayed up all night when she was sick. I had worked double shifts to pay for her schooling. And now I was nothing but a burden. Trevor's voice followed, smooth, matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing paint colors. The insurance money covered the big bills. That's a relief. We just need to get him settled somewhere else, and we can finally move forward. Lily let out a sigh, sharp and impatient. I can't keep pretending, Trevor. 3 weeks of cooking, cleaning, smiling, writing notes like some perfect daughter. I am done. He doesn't even notice half of it anyway. The sound of a fork clattering on a plate reached me, ordinary and yet hateful in its normalcy. They were eating while they carved me out of my own life. Trevor chuckled, low and steady. You've done more than enough. He can't hear a word. He just nods and smiles. It's pathetic, really. Pierce can sign off on the paperwork, and Maple Ridge has an opening next month. We can have him out by spring. Maple Ridge. My stomach turned at the name. I knew the place. An assisted living home on the edge of town. Clean, safe maybe, but cold. Not my home. Not the house Nora and I built with every dollar we could scrape together. They were already making plans to put me there, as if I had no say at all. Once he's out, Lily said, her tone lighter now, we can start fixing this place. I want the wall between the kitchen and dining room gone. Open concept. It'll look so modern. The realtor said it could add $50,000. Easily, Trevor agreed. I could almost hear the grin in his voice. And if we redo the master bath, maybe even more. This house could fetch close to $500 after updates. That's enough for a good down payment in Whitehall. Whitehall. They were already dreaming about their next house while sitting at my table. My knees shook so badly I had to grip the wall to stay upright. Each word was like another nail sealing the lid of a coffin, and I was the one being buried alive. My chest burned with memories. The night I sat at this same table with Nora, counting dollars to buy Lily her first car. The morning I signed loan checks to keep her in college when she called me crying, saying she was scared of debt. The day I wrote a check for her wedding, swallowing my pride as I dipped into my retirement savings so she could have the day she wanted. And now, to her, I was nothing but dead weight. Trevor lowered his voice, conspiratorial. Think he suspects anything? Lily gave a short laugh that was colder than any silence I had endured in the hospital. Are you kidding? He can't hear a thing. He just stares at me with those sad eyes, nodding when I write him notes. He doesn't even realize what's happening. Poor old man. I shut my eyes tight, fighting the rush of heat in my face. Those notes she wrote, I had saved some of them in my nightstand. Little phrases like, "Hope you're comfortable, Dad," or "You're the best." I had believed every word. I had thought they were proof of her love. Now I knew they were part of her performance, a costume she wore until she no longer needed it. I'm telling you, Lily continued, we need to get this done fast. The longer he stays here, the harder it gets. Maple Ridge has good reviews. They'll take care of him. And once it's all settled, we can finally have a life that isn't tied down by his needs. I felt something inside me crack, not like glass, but like old wood splitting under pressure. It wasn't only anger, it was grief. Grief for the girl Lily used to be, For the daughter who used to run into my arms after school, for the little girl who once told me she wanted to be just like her mom and dad. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who spoke of me as an obstacle, who saw my home as money, my care as a chore, my life as something in her way. I forced myself to breathe slowly, silently, leaning into the wall for support. Every instinct in me screamed to walk into that kitchen and shout, to demand an answer, to make her look me in the eyes when she said I was a burden, but something colder, steadier, settled in me instead. The same patience I had built over years of laying brick and steel, the same discipline that had kept me alive when machines failed and beams fell. No, I would not confront them now. Not yet. I needed to hear more. I needed to understand just how deep this betrayal ran before I made my move. My hand trembled on the wall, my ears sharp to every sound. The smell of garlic still lingered in the air, mixing with the faint tang of lemon cleaner. It was my home, but it no longer felt safe. And yet one truth had already taken root in me. They thought I was deaf. They thought I was helpless. They thought they could plan my life without me ever knowing. They had no idea that I could hear every word. I steadied myself before stepping into the kitchen, forcing my face into the same blank expression I had worn for weeks. My steps were heavier than usual, as though I was still unsteady. I let my hand brush against the wall for support, even though my balance was fine. Lily and Trevor were sitting at the table, coffee mugs in front of them, the remains of dinner on their plates. Their heads snapped up when they saw me, and in an instant the tone of their voices changed. "Dad," Lily said brightly, pushing back her chair with a squeak. She stood quickly, a look of concern painted across her face like a costume. "How are you feeling? You look tired." The same mouth that had just called me a burden was now curving into a soft smile. Her eyes widened in a perfect imitation of worry. She reached for my arm, steadying me as if I might fall. I let myself lean slightly into her touch, pretending to be fragile. Trevor raised his voice unnecessarily, speaking slowly as though he was addressing a child. "Hey there, Ed. How did the appointment go?" I blinked at him, then raised my hand to my ear and gave a small shrug. I tilted my head as if I could not quite understand. Lily nodded quickly, almost relieved that I had given the same performance they expected. She grabbed the notepad from the counter, the one she had been using all this time, and scribbled in quick strokes. "Doctor says your hearing might return soon. That's wonderful news." She held the paper up with a wide smile. I read it, and I made my eyes grow bright with false hope. I let my lips form a shaky smile and nodded eagerly. "Good," I whispered, making my voice just faint enough to seem uncertain. Inside, I was memorizing every detail. The way her eyebrows lifted a little too high, the way her hand squeezed my shoulder as though to sell the lie, the way Trevor leaned forward with his lips pressed into a sympathetic line. Trevor reached for the pad and wrote in his blocky handwriting, "Maybe we should start looking into care options for when you're feeling stronger. Just temporary." Lily added quickly beneath his words, "Just so you have help with medications and therapy. Nothing permanent." I looked down at the paper, then back up at them, my face arranged with the kind of naive gratitude they expected. I nodded again, clutching the notepad like a lifeline. I even let my lips tremble as though the idea touched me. They both relaxed, believing their little performance was holding. They thought they were clever, easing me into the plan as if they were doing it for my own good. They had no idea I could hear the contempt that spilled out of them when they thought I was deaf. For the next few minutes I played my role carefully. When Trevor asked if I was hungry, I tilted my head and waited for Lily to write it down. When she scribbled the words and held them out, I nodded slowly, as though grateful for her attention. I even let out a weary smile when Trevor patted my back and said loudly, "We're so glad you're okay." Every gesture, every word, felt like swallowing glass, but I forced myself to continue. I had learned on construction sites long ago that sometimes survival meant keeping calm, even when danger was right above your head. Finally, I pointed to the stairs and mimed closing my eyes, then scribbled one word myself on the pad. Tired. Lily smiled sweetly, the perfect daughter again. Of course, Dad, she said in that sugary tone. You rest as much as you need. I let her hug me, stiff and quick, before turning toward the staircase. My hand gripped the banister tighter than necessary, and I lifted each foot slowly, the way someone unsure of himself might climb. I could feel their eyes on me, watching. But when I reached the landing, I heard Trevor's voice drop to a whisper. He bought it completely. The words sliced through me. My back stiffened, but I forced myself to keep moving. Step by step I climbed, my heart pounding louder than my feet. When I reached my room, I closed the door softly and sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the quilt Nora had sewn years ago. I had seen enough in that kitchen to know the truth. They had no idea I was listening. They had no idea that every word they spoke in confidence was carving themselves into a trap. For the first time since my hearing returned, I allowed myself a smile. It was not joy, not relief, but something sharper. They thought I was still deaf, still lost in silence. That was their mistake, and I intended to make full use of it. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, and let the words replay in my mind. Care options, temporary, nothing permanent, all lies. They thought they were rehearsing a script for me, but they were really performing for themselves, and I was the only audience who mattered. Downstairs I could hear their voices again, muffled through the vents. They thought the game was theirs to play, but they had just given me the greatest weapon of all, knowledge. I closed my bedroom door and sat for a long time without moving. The walls of that house carried every word they spoke, and now they carried my silence too. The quilt Nora made lay across the bed, soft from years of use, and I found myself running my fingers over the stitching just to calm the shaking in my hands. Anger burned hot in me, but it was joined by something colder, a steady weight that told me I needed to think, not lash out. I stood and walked into the study across the hall. That room had always been my place of order. Nora used to tease me about the neat rows of folders and the way I labeled everything down to the smallest receipt. The scent of old paper and furniture polish met me as I opened the filing cabinet. The drawers slid out with the same familiar squeak they always had, like the house itself was sighing at the memories tucked inside. I pulled out a folder marked Lily's wedding. Inside were invoices and receipts from a decade ago, all paid in full by me. $35,000. I remembered cashing out part of my retirement account to cover it because Lily had begged me to make it beautiful. I had worked nights for months after that just to catch up. She had kissed my cheek at the reception and whispered, "Thank you, Dad. I'll never forget this." But she had. Another folder held student loan statements. $28,000 in checks, written from my account to keep her in college when she called me crying, saying she was drowning in debt. I remembered her voice on the phone that night, trembling with fear. "Dad, I can't do it. I'll have to drop out." And me answering without hesitation, "I'll handle it, sweetheart. Study hard. Be proud." There was more. An apartment down payment, $15,000. She had said it was just until she and Trevor got on their feet. A few months later, they needed help with a car payment. Then it was money for a vacation. Each time I reached into my pocket, telling myself that was what fathers were for. But tucked between all of that was the hardest folder to open. Medical bills. $67,000 from the months before Nora died. Insurance had covered some, but not all, and I had shouldered the rest alone. I could still see her thin hands gripping mine in the hospital bed, asking if Lily was coming that day, and me lying to her, saying yes, she'll be here tomorrow. Because Lily had always been too busy, too tired, too distracted. The papers blurred as I stared at them, not because of bad eyesight, but because my hands shook. I realized then that I had been giving all my life, sacrificing pieces of myself, my savings, my health, to make sure Lily never struggled. I thought I was loving her, protecting her. But what I had really done was teach her that everything would always be provided, that my sacrifices were endless and cost her nothing. I sat back in the chair and let out a long breath. Nora had warned me. She told me once, "You're creating a dependency, Ed. She needs to learn." I had brushed her off, saying, "She's our daughter, this is what family does." But now, staring at the proof in black and white, I knew Nora had seen more clearly than I ever had. The house seemed to echo with those memories. The scrape of a chair in the kitchen downstairs, the faint buzz of the refrigerator, the distant murmur of Lily's voice. All of it carried through the vents, reminding me that every sacrifice I had made was being repaid with contempt. I slid the papers back into their folders, my movements slow and deliberate. Each file felt heavier now, like it carried not just numbers but the truth of years wasted on someone who had never learned gratitude. I closed the drawer with a final push, the click of the lock sounding louder than it should have. On the desk lay a small leather prayer book that had belonged to Nora. Inside its cover, tucked between brittle pages, was a business card. Alicia Park, attorney at law. She had helped us with Nora's will years earlier, her calm voice guiding us through hard decisions. I picked up the card and turned it over in my hand, the edges soft from age. A thought stirred in me, quiet but steady. I was not powerless. I was not finished. They thought I was deaf. They thought I was weak. But the house had given me back every word. And now it had given me back the trail of paper that proved exactly who Lily had become. From downstairs I heard her laugh, light and casual, followed by Trevor's lower voice. "Pierce owes me a favor." The words carried clearly through the vent above the study door. I gripped the card tighter until my knuckles whitened. I knew then what I had to do. This house still spoke for me. It had given me the sounds, the proof, and now it had given me a name. And I was ready to listen all the way to the end. I sat at the desk staring at Alicia Park's card for a long time. The edges dug into my fingers as if to remind me I still had choices. The folders lay stacked neatly in the drawer again, the evidence of years of sacrifice tucked away, but the weight of them stayed heavy on my chest. I could not carry this alone. There was one person I had not told, one person who deserved to know the truth. Daniel. My son had moved to Cincinnati years ago. He had built a quiet life there with his wife and 2 kids. He wasn't perfect. He hadn't been able to visit often, and sometimes the distance between us felt wider than the miles on the road. But he had never asked me for a dime. When he called, it was to ask how I was doing, not what I could give. Nora always said he had her steadiness. I used to worry he didn't need me the way Lily did. Now I saw that was the difference between love and dependence. I opened the nightstand drawer and pulled out the old flip phone I kept hidden. Lily didn't know about it. I had bought it a couple years earlier for emergencies, paying cash so no one else would see the bill. I charged it in secret and kept the number tucked away. My hands shook as I flipped it open and scrolled to Daniel's contact. For a moment I wondered if I should wait, if dragging him into this mess would only break his heart. But I pressed the call button anyway. The line clicked and then his voice filled my ear. "Dad?" Hearing him call me, that made something in my chest loosen. "It's me," I said quietly. "You sound different. Stronger. I thought—" He hesitated. "Lily said you were still having trouble hearing." I let out a shaky breath. "That's why I'm calling. Daniel, my hearing came back 3 days ago, completely. I can hear you clear as day." There was silence on the line, then a sharp inhale. "Wait, what? You're kidding. That's incredible, Dad. Why didn't you tell Lily?" I swallowed hard. "Because of what I heard when I walked in this house. She doesn't know. She and Trevor think I'm still deaf. And Daniel, the things they've said—" My throat tightened, but I pushed the words out. "She called me a burden. They're planning to put me in Maple Ridge, to sell the house, to take everything." He didn't speak for a long time. I could hear his breath quicken through the phone. "Are you absolutely sure about this? Maybe you misheard?" "I wish I had," I whispered. "But I heard every word." "They're talking about doctors forging papers, making me look incompetent. They're planning my future like I'm already gone. I needed you to know." "Jesus Christ," Daniel muttered, his voice low and trembling. "Dad, I don't even know what to say. I should have been there more. I should have seen this coming." "You have your family," I said softly. "I never blamed you for living your life. But I need you now. I can't fight this alone. You won't have to. His voice sharpened with resolve. Tell me what you need. Do you want me to drive up tonight? Not yet, I said quickly. If they see you here too soon, they'll know something's wrong. For now, I need you to play along. Lily will call you, I'm sure of it. She'll spin her story, try to make herself the saint. Let her talk. Pretend you believe her. But remember everything she says. We might need it later. I can do that, he said firmly. I'll write down every word. A silence stretched between us then, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy with the truth we now shared. Finally he asked, his voice softer, How are you holding up? I looked around the room, at the quilt on the bed, at the photos of Nora smiling from the dresser. I've been better, but I'm not broken, not yet. You're stronger than anyone I know, he said. Mom always told me that. The mention of Nora brought a lump to my throat. She would have known what to do about Lily. She always saw clearer than I did. Daniel exhaled slowly. We'll figure this out together. I promise. From downstairs I heard the faint scrape of a chair and Lily's laughter, sweet and practiced. Then Trevor's voice, lower and grim. Pierce said Friday at 10. He'll do the evaluation then. My blood ran cold. Daniel, I whispered into the phone, they're moving faster than I thought. They've set it for Friday morning. His voice sharpened again. Then we don't have much time. Call Alicia tomorrow. I'll clear my schedule. If Lily calls me, I'll act concerned. I'll make her think I doubt you. She won't see it coming. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tight. For the first time in days, I didn't feel completely alone. Thank you, son. You don't have to thank me, he said quietly. I should be the one apologizing. But I'll make it right. For you, for Mom. I ended the call and set the phone back in the drawer, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. The house was still filled with voices plotting my downfall, but now another voice echoed louder inside me. My son's promise. And for the first time since the silence had ended, I believed I still had a chance. The house was quiet when I woke the next morning, but quiet no longer meant peace. It meant they were downstairs plotting or out making arrangements or whispering into phones I could not see. I moved carefully through the hallway, listening to the creaks in the floor, each one familiar to me after decades of living there. I knew which boards groaned and which steps carried sound to the kitchen. I knew how to move in this house better than anyone, and now that knowledge was my armor. I went to the study and opened the drawer where the pamphlet from Maple Ridge Saturday Lily had left it tucked between bills, as if she were simply researching options. The glossy pages showed smiling nurses, bright common rooms, tidy gardens. Words like comfort and care were scattered across the paper, but all I could see were the prices. $4,800 a month. That number circled in Lily's handwriting, underlined twice. She had done the math already. She knew exactly how many months my savings could stretch before the money ran out. I imagined myself in one of those rooms, stripped of my house, my workshop, my memories. I imagined Daniel bringing the grandchildren for a short visit, forced to sign his name at a check-in desk just to see me. I imagined Lily standing in my living room deciding which wall to tear down first. The thought made me grip the desk until my knuckles turned white. I began to keep notes of my own. In a spiral notebook I wrote down times, dates, words. The night Lily called me a burden. The day Trevor spoke about the realtor. The whispers about Pierce signing the forms. Every scrap of evidence I could gather went into that notebook. My handwriting was shaky at times, but the record was clear. That night I pretended to be asleep in my chair while they talked in the kitchen. My ears caught every word through the vent. Lily's voice was brisk. We need to start documenting incidents. Things that show he's slipping. Forgetting to eat, getting confused. It has to look convincing. Trevor answered between bites of food. Easy enough. We'll say he left the stove on. Or wandered outside without a coat. Pierce said all he needs is a pattern. Dad's always been careful, Lily said with a sigh. We have to make it believable. Then we'll create it, Trevor replied. My blood turned cold. They were not waiting for me to fail. They were planning to invent my failures, to put lies on paper until those lies became my reality. The next morning I found the kitchen stove turned slightly on, the burner cold, but the knob twisted as if left by mistake. I knew I hadn't touched it. Lily glanced at it and shook her head with exaggerated sadness. "Poor Dad," she said loudly, just in case I could hear a little. "He's slipping." She wrote a note and placed it on the counter. "Please be more careful with the stove." I smiled at her like a guilty old man who had forgotten his own hand. Inside, I burned. Every day I watched more of these setups. A cup left on the porch railing blamed on me. The mail left unopened, even though I had sorted it the night before. Lily sighed and wrote reminders on her pad, her performance flawless. Trevor nodded with a look of practiced concern. They were weaving their paper trap around me, thread by thread. I decided I would weave one of my own. I began testing which floorboards carried the clearest sound from the kitchen. The third step on the staircase groaned if you stepped on the left side, but silent on the right. If I leaned against the hallway wall near the heating vent, their voices carried perfectly into my room. I spent hours memorizing these details, using the house like an instrument. At night, I read through the Maple Ridge pamphlet again, my eyes tracing the cheerful photographs. I thought of Nora, how she used to plant tulips in the front yard every spring, how she would set out fresh pies to cool on the windowsill. She would never forgive me if I let strangers sell this house for granite countertops and an open floor plan. So I kept writing in my notebook, building my own record while they built theirs. 2 stories being written under the same roof, one of love and memory, one of greed and betrayal. I did not know yet how mine would end, but I knew this much. If they thought their paper trail would bury me, they had forgotten who had taught them to write in the first place. Late one evening, through the vent, I heard Trevor ask, "How soon do we push it?" "Friday morning," Lily replied. 10 o'clock sharp. Pierce will be here. By next week, it's all ours." I sat in the dark, the notebook open on my lap, and wrote down her words with a steady hand. The trap was nearly set, but not only theirs, mine too. The morning sun broke through the blinds in thin stripes, laying across my desk like prison bars. I had barely slept. Every creak of the house kept me awake. Every whisper of Lily's footsteps in the hallway reminded me of what she was planning. By Friday, Dr. Pierce would be at my door with papers declaring me unfit, and by the weekend my daughter would have the keys to my life. I could not let that happen. I pulled the card from my wallet again, Alicia Park's name staring back at me. She had guided Nora and me when we prepared her will years ago, her calm voice explaining things I barely understood. She had been patient with us then. I prayed she would be patient with me now. I dialed the number, and when her assistant answered, I asked for the first appointment she had, 11:30, same day. I told her I would be there. The drive into downtown Columbus felt different this time. Every sound that filled the car, the rumble of the engine, the rush of passing trucks, even the clicking of my turn signal reminded me I was alive, alert, capable. They thought I was helpless, but I still had strength in me. I parked outside her office, a restored brick townhouse that looked more like a family home than a law firm. That felt fitting. Inside the lobby smelled faintly of coffee and lemon polish. The receptionist, a woman with kind eyes, looked up from her desk. "Mr. Hale, Miss Park will be right with you." Her voice carried no pity, only courtesy, and that gave me courage. Alicia emerged from her office a moment later. She had streaks of gray in her dark hair now, but the same sharp eyes I remembered. She shook my hand firmly, as though testing if I was steady. "Ed," she said softly, "it's been a while." "It has," I answered, forcing my voice to stay calm. "But I need your help, and I need it fast." She led me into her office, walls lined with shelves of thick law books and photographs of her family. The air was warm and steady, like a place where truth could not be twisted. I sat in the leather chair across from her desk and folded my hands to keep them from trembling. "Tell me what's going on," she said. I told her everything. The accident, the weeks of silence, the miracle of my hearing returning, and most of all, what I had overheard since. I spoke slowly, careful with each word, as though saying them aloud might shatter me. When I told her Lily called me a burden, my throat closed. When I explained the plan for Pierce to declare me incompetent, my hands curled into fists. Alicia did not interrupt. She wrote notes in neat lines, her brow furrowed, but her eyes never left me. When I finished, she sat back. You've come at the right time. If Pierce files those evaluations, they could challenge your competency in court. We need to act immediately to protect your estate and your wishes. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. What do I need to do? We'll update your will today, she said. We'll put everything into a living trust with Daniel as successor trustee. We'll add a no-contest clause so Lily risks losing even the smallest share if she challenges it. And we'll record a letter of intent, in your own words, explaining your decisions. That way no one can say you weren't clear. Her efficiency steadied me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like the ground under my feet wasn't crumbling. She called in 2 paralegals to serve as witnesses. She ran me through a brief cognitive test questions about the date, the president, my memory of recent events. I answered each one clearly, my voice strong. She nodded with satisfaction. This record will prove your capacity if they try to challenge. We went through each asset carefully, the house, the savings, my pension, even the tools in the garage I had collected over decades. She wrote everything down with meticulous care. Do you want Lily to receive anything? She asked finally. $1,000, I said, my jaw tight, for reasons she will understand. Alicia raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. She typed it exactly as I said. We spent the next hour finalizing the documents. My hand shook a little as I signed, but my signature was clear. The witnesses signed after me, and Alicia sealed everything with a practiced motion. When it was finished, she handed me a copy in a thick envelope. Keep this somewhere visible, she advised. If Lily finds it, she'll know her game is over. But keep the original safe here with me. I held the envelope as if it were armor. Thank you, I whispered. You're not alone in this, she said firmly. If Pierce shows up, call me. If they try anything, document it. You're stronger than they realize. I walked out of her office into the cool air of West Alder Street, the envelope heavy in my hands, but my heart lighter than it had been in weeks. The city sounds filled my ears, buses groaning, people chatting, a car horn blaring down the block. I had never been so grateful for the noise of life. Driving back, I rehearsed what I would do. I would place the envelope where Lily could not miss it. I would keep playing deaf. I would let her dig herself deeper. They thought they were weaving a trap for me, but now I had laid one of my own. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw Lily's car already parked there. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel. The house stood before me, solid and familiar, but it no longer felt safe. It felt like a battlefield. I slipped the envelope under my arm and walked toward the front door. Whatever happened next, I was ready. I placed the thick envelope on the kitchen counter as carefully as if I were setting down a live wire. The weight of it seemed to echo in the room, a silent challenge waiting to be discovered. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee grounds and lemon cleaner, the same scents that had greeted me every morning for years, but now the air felt charged. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each second drawing me closer to the moment they would walk through the door. I settled myself in the recliner in the living room, newspaper spread in my hands. My body looked relaxed, but my ears were tuned to every sound. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips as I smoothed the paper. The envelope sat only a few feet away, plain and unremarkable except for the truth it carried inside. At 2:45, I heard the familiar crunch of tires in the driveway. My breath caught. The slam of car doors followed, then the muffled sound of shopping bags rustling. Lily's voice floated in through the front door, cheerful and careless. Hope he didn't try to cook while we were gone. The key turned in the lock and the door swung open. The bags hit the hardwood with a thud. Silence stretched for a long beat before I heard the sharp intake of breath. "What's this?" Lily's voice was tight, higher than usual. The crackle of paper tearing filled the air. I could picture her hands clawing at the envelope, pulling the documents free. More rustling. Then stillness. as if the house itself held its breath. "Chris," she whispered hoarsely, "get in here now." Footsteps pounded across the floor. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Oh," her voice shook with rage. "That old man changed his will." I turned the page of the newspaper slowly, keeping my breathing even. Inside I was smiling, but outside I looked like nothing more than a tired man reading in his chair. "What do you mean changed it?" Trevor's voice rose with alarm. "It's dated today." "Today, Chris. While we were out buying groceries, he went downtown and signed everything over to Daniel. The house, the money, everything. All I get is $1,000. 1,000. There was the sound of a chair scraping hard against the floor. Trevor began pacing, his footsteps quick and sharp. "How much are we talking?" "The house is worth at least $450, plus savings, investments, over $700,000. All of it gone." Her voice cracked on the last word. I could hear her breathing fast, anger and panic mixing. Trevor swore under his breath. "That can't be legal. He's not competent. We'll challenge it." "Oh, there's more," Lily spat. I could hear the rustle of the paper shaking in her hands. "To my daughter, $1,000 for reasons she will understand." "He knows, Chris. Somehow he knows." The words were like music to me. I lowered the newspaper just enough to glimpse the kitchen doorway. Lily stood stiff, her face blotched red, her hands clenched around the papers. Trevor leaned close, his jaw tight. "Impossible," he said. "He can't hear a damn thing. We've been talking in front of him for weeks. He's clueless." Then explain this," she hissed, slamming the papers onto the counter. I lifted the paper back up, hiding my expression. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to stand and shout that I had heard every word, but I knew it wasn't time. The game was still unfolding. "Okay, calm down," Trevor muttered, trying to steady her. "If he did this, then maybe he's not as out of it as we thought. Or maybe he is, and we use that. We say it's the product of a confused mind. We'll get Pierce to write the evaluation faster." "Testing us?" Lily's voice rose dangerously. "You think he's been testing us by pretending to be deaf?" "Keep your voice down," Trevor snapped. "He's right in the next room. I don't care if he hears me. If he's been playing games, then the games are over." Her footsteps moved toward the living room. I kept my eyes on the print, my head tilted down as if half asleep. She stopped just a few feet away. "Dad," she said in that sugary tone she used for performance, but I heard the tremor beneath it. "Are you awake?" I stirred slowly, blinked at her as though just roused from a nap. "Hmm?" She studied my face, her fists still tight at her sides. Did you go anywhere today while we were out?" I tilted my head, let my face show nothing but puzzled innocence. "Go somewhere? Number?" I stayed right here. Her eyes narrowed, searching for cracks. "You didn't visit anyone? Make any phone calls?" I touched my ear and gave her a faint smile, the same one I had used all week. "Sweetheart, I can't hear well enough for phone calls. You know that." Her jaw clenched, but she forced her face back into a mask of concern. "Of course, I forgot. I'm sorry, Dad. Get some rest." She turned away, but her whisper carried back to Trevor in the kitchen. "Either he's the best actor in the world, or we're missing something." "Oh?" Trevor's reply was low and grim. "Call Pierce. Tell him we need those papers tomorrow, not next week." I lifted the newspaper higher to hide the smile tugging at my mouth. They thought they were closing their trap, but all they were doing was tightening the noose around their own necks. The moment had to come. I had played along long enough, nodding and smiling, letting them write their notes and whisper their schemes. But as I looked at the suitcases I had packed with their belongings, sitting squarely in the middle of the living room floor, I felt the strength in my legs return. This was my house. This was my life. And I was done pretending. When Lily and Trevor walked in and saw the bags, they froze. The shopping bags slipped from Lily's hands and thudded against the hardwood. Her eyes darted from the luggage to me, then back again. Trevor's face tightened, his jaw flexing like he was bracing for a blow. "Dad!" Lily said, her voice rising in a pitch that barely hid her panic. "What is this? Why are our things packed?" Trevor stepped closer, squinting at me. "What's going on here, Ed?" I lowered the newspaper I had been holding and folded it neatly on my lap. I looked directly at them, steady and calm, and said in a clear voice, "You are leaving my house." Lily went pale. Her lips parted, but no words came out at first. She clutched the counter as if it could hold her up. "Dad, did you just—" Her voice broke into a whisper. "You can hear me?" Trevor took a step back, color draining from his face. "How long?" I rose slowly from the chair, my joints stiff but my back straight. Every single word since I came home from the hospital. Every word about Maple Ridge. Every word about selling my house. Every word about having me declared incompetent. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Lily shook her head, tears springing to her eyes, but I could see calculation working behind them. "Dad, no. You misunderstood. We were just worried about you. We wanted what was best for you." "You called me a burden in my own home," I said, my voice steady, cutting through her excuses. "You planned renovations while I sat upstairs. You talked about my money like it was already yours. That is not love. That is greed." Trevor's mask cracked first. His voice rose, anger laced with desperation. "You can't just throw us out. We gave up our apartment to take care of you. We've been here every day, making sure you're okay." "You moved in because you couldn't afford rent," I replied coldly. "And you stayed because you thought you could take everything I built." Lily's tears spilled over then, streaming down her face as she dropped to her knees beside me. She grabbed my arm with both hands. "Please, Dad, don't do this. I'm your daughter. I made mistakes, but I love you. I've always loved you." I looked down at her, remembering all the times I had opened my wallet for her, believing the promises that came with every request. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have planned to lock me away. You wouldn't have laughed about selling the house where your mother died. You wouldn't have celebrated what you thought was my defeat." Her grip tightened, her voice turning frantic. "You can't mean this. Mom would be devastated if she saw you treating me this way." "Oh, your mother warned me about your selfishness," I said, my eyes hard. "She saw it long before I did. She asked me to be careful, and I wasn't. That ends now." Trevor tried a different tactic, his voice lower, almost pleading. "Ed, think about this. You'll be all alone. We're family. We can work this out. Just calm down." I pointed to the suitcases. "There is no working this out. Everything you brought into this house is packed. Take it and go. Tonight." "Oh, you can't just throw us out like garbage," Trevor snapped, his face flushing red. "You threw away family the moment you decided I was nothing more than an obstacle," I answered. Lily's sobs filled the room, but her eyes kept flicking to Trevor, waiting for him to fix what she couldn't. He grabbed one of the bags with a sharp yank. "You'll regret this," he spat. I stood tall, the strength of truth holding me up. The only thing I regret is not seeing the truth sooner." "Oh." They staggered toward the door with their suitcases, their expensive coats and gadgets weighing them down. At the threshold, Lily turned back one last time, her face streaked with tears, her voice shaking. "If you change your mind—" "I won't," I said firmly. "And don't call me asking for money." The door slammed shut behind them, the sound echoing through the house like a final verdict. I stood in the quiet that followed, breathing deeply. The silence was not heavy this time. It was clean. It was mine. I walked to the window and watched them struggle to fit their bags into the car. Trevor cursed under his breath, slamming the trunk again and again until it closed. Lily sat stiffly in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, her face twisted with resentment. When the car finally pulled out of the driveway, the tail lights disappeared into the dark street. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace, but I also knew this wasn't the end. They were not finished with me. They would come back, in some form or another, and I needed to be ready. When the sound of their car finally faded into the night, the house seemed to release a breath it had been holding for weeks. I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the empty space where their bags had been, and I felt the weight in my chest begin to lift. The silence that followed was not the silence of my deafness, nor the tense quiet of whispered plots. It was clean, almost gentle, like the house itself was relieved to be rid of them. I walked slowly through each room, letting my hand brush against familiar walls. In the kitchen, the counters were bare except for the grocery bags they had dropped when they first saw the suitcases. I lifted one and peered inside. New clothes, wine, little luxuries I had never bought for myself. They had planned to celebrate, no doubt, once I was out of the way. I carried the bags to the trash bin without looking again. Whatever they had purchased to toast their victory could rot with the rest of their lies. In the hallway, I stopped to take down a framed photo of Lily that still hung on the wall. It was her high school graduation picture, cap and gown, her smile wide and innocent. I held it in my hands for a long time. That girl was gone, and maybe she had been gone for years. I placed the photo in a drawer. I could not look at it now, not when her words still rang in my ears. I moved upstairs. The guest room where they had stayed was stripped bare. The bed was unmade, the dresser drawers empty. A faint scent of perfume lingered in the air, mixed with Trevor's cologne. I opened the closet and found one forgotten shoebox. Inside were receipts, all of them billed to my address. Designer jeans, electronics, jewelry, more evidence of how they had used my roof as their staging ground for greed. I set the box by the door, planning to throw it out in the morning. In my own bedroom, Nora's quilt still lay across the bed. I sat on the edge and pressed my face against it. For the first time in weeks, I felt I could breathe without fear. I whispered her name, telling her it was done, that I had finally stood up, that I had listened to the warnings she had given me in life. A quiet strength seemed to wrap around me, as if she were nodding in approval. The phone buzzed on my nightstand. It was Daniel. "Dad, how did it go?" "They're gone," I said. My voice was steady, stronger than it had been in a long time. "Are you okay?" I thought about the question. "I feel lighter. I feel like I can finally breathe again. I should have done this sooner." He was silent for a moment, then he said, "I'm proud of you. Mom would be proud too." That broke something in me, but not in a painful way. It was like a dam giving way, letting the truth finally flow. "I should have listened to her years ago," I admitted. "You gave Lily every chance," Daniel said gently. "That's not weakness. That's love. But now you've given yourself a chance too." I thanked him, and we promised to see each other soon. When I hung up, the house felt warm around me, like it was no longer a battlefield but a refuge again. I made myself a simple dinner of scrambled eggs and toast. I sat at the table alone, but it did not feel lonely. No one criticized the food. No one made comments about the cost of groceries. I ate slowly, savoring the peace. Out the window, the last of the winter light faded, and I realized the house looked beautiful in the dusk. Later, I gathered the remaining pictures from the mantel. Some I left in place, the ones of Nora and Daniel and the grandchildren. Others I set aside, the ones that still showed Lily smiling at family gatherings. It was not cruelty. It was survival. I needed to see the truth now, not the illusions I had clung to for too long. Before bed, I walked through the house one more time. The air felt clearer, as though even the walls had let go of the bitterness they had absorbed. The creaks in the floor sounded familiar again, not threatening. The heating vent carried only the hum of the furnace, not the echo of betrayal. I paused at the front door and looked out at the quiet street. For the first time since Nora's death, I felt the possibility of peace in this house. But deep inside, I also knew they would not give up so easily. People who tasted money like that did not walk away forever. I locked the door, slid the bolt into place, and whispered to myself, "Let them try." The house exhaled with me, and I climbed the stairs ready for whatever came next. Friday morning came with a gray sky and a thin drizzle tapping against the windows. I woke before dawn and sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, the steam rising in front of me. My hands were steady as I folded and refolded Alicia's card in my pocket. By 10 o'clock, Dr. Pierce would be standing at my door with his clipboard and his lies. But this time the stage would not belong to him. At 9:30 sharp, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Alicia standing there in a neat gray suit, her briefcase in one hand. Beside her was a woman I had never met before, a licensed geriatric psychologist Alicia had brought as a witness. Their calm presence filled the house like reinforcements arriving at the front line. I welcomed them in and felt the tension in my chest ease a little. "Remember," Alicia said quietly, "you don't need to argue. Just answer honestly, clearly, and let us handle the rest." I nodded. I had been rehearsing my clarity for days, repeating dates, names, numbers until they rolled off my tongue like old prayers. At exactly 10, the doorbell rang again. When I opened it, Dr. Pierce stood there with his polished shoes and smug smile. His leather briefcase gleamed, and his eyes scanned me as though I were already a patient. "Good morning, Mr. Hale," he said smoothly, stepping inside without waiting for my invitation. "We're just going to run a few evaluations today, nothing to worry about." But when he entered the living room and saw Alicia seated with her open briefcase and the psychologist setting up her clipboard, the color drained from his face. He froze for a moment before pasting on another smile. "I wasn't aware we'd have company. This is an independent capacity evaluation," Alicia said crisply. "Mr. Hale asked for it, and it will be conducted today before you proceed with anything else." Pierce's eyes flickered, and for a second I saw panic flash behind them. He tried to recover with a laugh. "Well, that's unusual, but if that's what the family wants—" "It's what I want," I said firmly, my voice cutting through the room. His head snapped toward me, surprise etched across his face. He had expected the weak old man, the deaf one who nodded dumbly. Instead, I met his eyes squarely and repeated, "It's what I want." The psychologist began her questions. What was today's date? Who was the president? Could I remember 3 words after a short delay? I answered each one calmly, clearly, my voice steady. She asked me to describe my morning routine, and I recited it step by step, even mentioning the drizzle outside and the sound of the mail truck I had heard at 9:15. Her pen scratched across the paper, her expression unreadable but professional. When she was finished, she looked up and said simply, "Mr. Hale is fully competent. His memory and reasoning are intact. There is no evidence of cognitive decline." Pierce shifted uneasily, his fingers tapping against his briefcase. "These tests can be unreliable. Stress can mask underlying issues." Alicia leaned forward, her voice like steel. "What is unreliable is a physician conducting evaluations at the request of interested parties without proper disclosure. You should know the consequences of falsifying medical records, Dr. Pierce. The Ohio Medical Board does not take that lightly." His jaw tightened. "Now wait a minute. I never—" "Yes, you did," I interrupted. "I heard you promised Lily a favor. I heard her planning with you to declare me incompetent. Every word." For the first time, Pierce's confident facade cracked completely. His eyes darted to the floor, then back to Alicia. She was already closing her briefcase. "We will be reporting this conversation to the board. Consider your visit concluded." "Oh." He tried to stammer out a defense, but his words collapsed under the weight of the silence that followed. Finally, he turned on his heel and left, his polished shoes squeaking against the floor. The door clicked shut behind him, and the sound felt like a victory drumbeat. I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Alicia placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "You did perfectly. They won't be able to use him now. Whatever Lily tries next, she's lost her main weapon." "Oh." I looked around my living room, at the familiar chairs, the mantel, the photographs of my family. For the first time in weeks, I felt like the house belonged to me again. The walls no longer carried whispers of betrayal. They carried the echo of truth. As Alicia and the psychologist left, I stood at the window watching the drizzle turn to steady rain. Pierce's car pulled away quickly. like a man fleeing a crime scene. I knew Lily would be furious when she heard what happened. I knew the battle wasn't finished, but the ground had shifted. I wasn't the helpless old man she thought I was. I whispered to the empty house, "Let her come, I'm ready." The rain tapped harder against the glass, like applause. The house was calm in the days that followed, but I knew storms were breaking elsewhere. News travels fast when people's reputations are on the line. Alicia had not wasted a moment after Dr. Wace. Pierce slunk out of my living room. She filed the report with the state medical board that very afternoon. I did not need to be told what it said. Her words were sharp and precise, and they cut where they needed to cut. 2 mornings later, as I was pouring coffee, I caught the sound of hushed voices outside. Mrs. Alvarez from next door was speaking to her husband as they worked in their yard. "Did you hear about Dr. Pierce? They're looking into him. Something about false evaluations." My hand froze on the coffee pot. I let the words sink in slowly, the way warm sunlight creeps across a floor. Justice does not always arrive with sirens. Sometimes it arrives in whispers over a garden fence. By the end of the week, I heard more. A friend from church called, his tone low. "Ed, I don't know what you got mixed up in, but that doctor, folks are saying he may lose his license." I thanked him without explaining. I did not need to justify myself. The truth was working quietly on its own. Lily, though, did not call. Not a single text, not a single note slipped under the door. I thought her silence would bring me peace, but instead it showed me how deeply she had relied on deception. When the mask cracked, she had nothing left to say. Her absence was an answer in itself. Trevor, on the other hand, could not keep his temper sealed. Word reached me through a neighbor that he had been shouting in the driveway of a client's home, slamming the trunk of his car after losing another job. Someone had reported irregularities in his contracting business, an audit triggered by the very same letter Alicia had sent to protect me. I imagined him storming around their small apartment, blaming Lily for every door that closed. The thought did not give me joy, only a strange kind of relief. They were reaping what they had sown. One afternoon I drove to the hospice where Nora had spent her final weeks. I carried with me the quilt she had sewn, the one that had comforted me in lonely nights. I donated it in her name. The nurse who accepted it smiled kindly and said it would be used to bring warmth to another family. That was justice too, the kind that does not make headlines. I walked out into the sunlight and felt lighter. Back home, the house felt different each day. The echoes of whispered betrayal no longer haunted the walls. Instead, friends began stopping by. Mrs. Alvarez came with a casserole. An old coworker dropped off a basket of fruit. People who had seen me as withdrawn now saw me reclaiming my ground. They did not ask for explanations. They offered kindness. Still, I knew the war was not finished. Late one night, the phone rang. The voice on the machine was Lily's, cold, controlled. "You made your choice, Dad, so did I." The line clicked off. I sat in the dark, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, feeling the sting of her words. But beneath it was calm. She had revealed herself fully, and I no longer had to wonder where she stood. The next morning, I took another small step. I called the bank and removed her name as my emergency contact. I updated my medical directives at Alicia's urging. Each task was a brick placed firmly back into the foundation of my life. The house itself seemed to respond. The air felt fresher, the floorboards steadier, as if the old place approved. Justice had not roared into my life with flashing lights. It had arrived quietly, in canceled contracts, in professional inquiries, in the silence of a daughter who could no longer pretend. It was not the kind of justice I had once imagined when my anger burned hottest, but it was the kind that lasted. As evening fell, I lit the small lamp in the living room and sat with a book. The rain tapped against the windows, steady and gentle. I thought of Nora, how she always said the truth would come out in its own time. I had doubted her back then. Now I knew she was right. I closed my eyes and let the sound of the rain carry me into sleep. The house exhaled again, and this time, so did I. The morning light came through the maple trees in soft streaks, and for the first time in a long time I felt no dread about the day ahead. I sat at the dining table with a pen and a stack of paper. It was not bills or receipts this time. It was a letter. I had carried too many words in my chest, and it was time to set them down. I began with her name. Lily. My hand trembled, but not with anger. It trembled with the weight of years of being a father who gave without boundaries. I wrote slowly, choosing words that were firm but not cruel. I told her that I loved her, that I had always loved her, but that love did not mean I would allow myself to be used. I wrote that I knew everything, that I had heard it all, and that trust once broken is not easily repaired. I told her my door was not closed forever, but it would only open again to truth, respect, and repentance. When I finished, I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Whether she ever read it or not did not matter yet. What mattered was that I had drawn the line. For the first time, I had said no to her in a way that could not be bent or twisted. Later that day, I met with Alicia again. We signed the final documents for the living trust. My house was now protected, my savings secure, my wishes clear. Daniel was named trustee, and the grandchildren would have a portion set aside for their education. As I signed the papers, I felt something settle inside me, like a heavy load being set down after miles of carrying it. "Do you feel ready?" Alicia asked. "I feel free," I answered, and I meant it. Back home, I sat in the living room and looked around. The photos on the mantel had changed. I left the ones of Daniel, of the grandchildren, of Nora smiling in the garden. I put away the ones of Lily for now. Not out of spite, but because I needed space to see clearly. Daniel called that evening. "Dad, the kids want to come visit next weekend. They've been talking about sleeping over at Grandpa's house." His voice carried warmth, the kind of warmth I had almost forgotten was possible. "I'd love that," I told him. This house could use laughter again. After we hung up, I sat with the quiet and thought about the meaning of family. For too long I had believed family meant giving without end, even when it drained me. Nora used to warn me that kindness without limits was not kindness at all, it was enabling. Now I understood. Love needed boundaries. Without them it rotted into entitlement. That night I drafted a list, small steps toward building bridges where they belonged. Lunch with old friends from work, a trip to visit Daniel and the grandchildren, a call to the church about volunteering, pieces of a life that had been overshadowed by Lily's demands. I was not closing the door on her forever. I still hoped one day she would knock with honesty in her heart. But I would not chase her. I would not hand her the keys to my house or my life again. She would have to choose what love looked like, just as I had chosen. As I set the pen down, I looked through the window. The sky was clear, the moon hanging above the rooftops. The house felt lighter, freer, as though it approved of my choices. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a future not defined by someone else's needs. A future built on respect, not guilt. A future where love was given freely but wisely. I whispered into the quiet room, "This is what love looks like." And the house, steady and strong around me, seemed to whisper it back. The knock came just after sunset. It was not loud, just a soft tap on the front door that barely carried through the quiet house. I had been sitting in my recliner with a book open on my lap, though I had not turned a page in 10 minutes. The sound made me lift my head. For a moment I wondered if I had imagined it. Then it came again, faint but steady. I rose slowly, every step echoing in the stillness. When I opened the door, no one was there. The street was empty, the porch light throwing a pale circle onto the damp boards. The maple branches swayed gently in the evening breeze, whispering against one another like an old secret. My eyes fell to the mat. There it was. An envelope, cream-colored, with my name written in handwriting I knew as well as my own. I bent down and picked it up. My hands shook as I carried it back inside. The paper felt fragile, as though it might crumble if I pressed too hard. I sat at the table, the The same table where I had eaten countless meals with Nora and raised both my children, and I slid my finger under the flap. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. The words were short, written in Lily's quick, slanted style. "Dad, I'm sorry, but I'm not ready." That was all. At the bottom, taped neatly, was a pressed maple leaf. It must have come from the tree out front. I held it in my hand, its edges dry and brittle, its veins dark against the pale brown. I remembered walking with her under those same trees when she was a little girl, her hand in mine, her pockets full of leaves she insisted were treasures. My chest ached as I sat there staring at the note. It was not forgiveness, it was not confession. It was something in between, a pause on a road that had no clear end. She had not cut me out completely, but she had not come inside either. I folded the note carefully and placed it beside Nora's photograph on the mantel. Her smile in that picture was soft and knowing, as if she had expected this moment all along. I whispered to her, "She's still out there. Maybe one day." The house was quiet around me, but it no longer felt heavy. The silence was a companion now, not an enemy. I stood by the window and watched the street. The porch light glowed on the empty sidewalk, the shadows stretching across the yard. Somewhere a dog barked and a car engine rumbled in the distance. Life kept moving forward, with or without apologies. I thought of Daniel and the grandchildren. Their laughter would fill this house soon, and that was something real, something steady. I thought of the list I had written, of the lunches and visits I had promised myself. I thought of the quilt at the hospice, already bringing warmth to someone else. The note remained on the mantel, but I felt no urge to cling to it. It was hers to carry now, her burden to decide when or if she wanted to cross the bridge I had left standing. My part was finished. I had chosen my boundaries. I had chosen peace. Before heading upstairs, I took out my phone and sent her a message. Just one line. "When you are ready to talk with honesty, I am here." Then I turned the phone face down on the counter. Whether she answered or not no longer defined me. I climbed the stairs slowly, each board familiar under my feet. The house no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a home again, scarred but still strong. In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked out at the maple tree swaying against the night sky. I did not know what tomorrow would bring. I did not know if Lily would ever come back with truth in her hands instead of schemes. But I knew this much. I was no longer the deaf, confused man she thought I was. I was her father, and I was still standing. As I lay down beneath Nora's quilt, I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. The house breathed with me, steady and calm. Somewhere in the distance, the wind carried a faint rustle of leaves across the porch. I let it lull me into sleep, not as a warning this time, but as a promise. Whatever came next, I was ready. I stood in the quiet of my home, the note from Lily resting beside Nora's photo, and I felt a strange peace. She had chosen her path, and I had chosen mine. For the first time in years, I was no longer carrying the weight of someone else's greed. I had learned that love without respect is not love at all, and kindness without boundaries is not kindness. This house, my life, and my dignity were mine again. What do you think, friends? Should I forgive Lily if she returns, or is it too late? Share your thoughts below.